welcome to Matt.
How you doing, mate? How you doing?
Fresh in from Alton Towers.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great day, great fun. Welcome to you guys, obviously from RunThrough Instagram. Good to see you. I'm here with Lewis Moses. He's my good friend, but he's also former GB athlete, 1500 metre runner who went to the World Indoor Championships, and he's also a running coach now. So he's been coaching hundreds of athletes over the years, and we thought we'd bring him on today to ask him a few questions about running and building up to races. And obviously, most of you guys know us through the RunThrough community, races mainly, I suppose, and our running club as well. But I thought maybe get him on, ask you a few questions about what's happening, and hopefully it'll be interesting to you guys to find out some information about that. You've been for a 22 miler today, haven't you?
22 long miles, yeah. Our longest run for a long, long time. I'm actually coaching quite a few athletes going to Valencia Marathon, which is December 3rd. It's kind of the last of the marathon season, the one that falls just before winter. We've got 7 or 8 athletes going out there. So one of the guys who's local to me was doing a 22 miler today. Yeah, a long one. And I decided, if I'm setting it, I should be also taking that pain in as well. So it was good though. We were saying on the run, and I think, a lot of runners will kind of be able to touch on this, is it's a little bit daunting for people sometimes when they see a long run in the schedule, and you plan it in on a Sunday and you think, I've got that to come. But we were both saying as we were out there on the run, what would you rather be doing? Yeah, on a Sunday afternoon, you're out in the fresh air, it was a beautiful day, we were chatting away, putting the worlds to rights. So actually, we were running past people in houses, sat down, I was like, I know I'd rather be out the door, out the door.
Definitely. Right, so I've got a few questions just around about building up to races and what you should do to prepare for that. So if you've entered a race and you need to train for that race, say it's your first 5K, or say you've not running a long time or racing a long time, and you're doing a 10K, what's the first step you'd take?
Great question. The first step I take as a coach, and it was actually a similar approach I took when I was an athlete. I think that's one of the most important things I want to get across here to people who listen. This is about you. It's not about me as a coach. It's about you and what you can get from this. So I'm going to relate it to you as much as I possibly can. As a coach, what I tend to do, which comes from my athlete philosophy, is I look at the date when I'm racing and then I backtrack from there. So I get that race in the calendar and then I backtrack to look at what timeline I've got to play with. Because what that gives me is kind of an idea, or certainly a nice timeline into the event. So I can plan what I want in the lead up to that. So when I was an athlete, that would be looking at more my social calendar, my lifestyle, how I'm going to fit my training in, having a look at the weekends up to it, when do I want to race in the build up to it. And as a coach, it's similar, but it's more how am I going to fit the training into this cycle? What's the training going to look like? When do I want the athletes to race in the build up to their target race? If it's somebody's first race, how do I want them to progress towards that first race? Where do I want them to be at certain checkpoints? And usually the athlete will set goals along the way as well. So I like to backtrack and have that conversation with the athlete and go, right, okay, what are we looking for at each stage of that training plan?
Okay, cool. Yeah, so if you were to, and this is like kind of a raw question, I know everyone's completely different, but if you had a race, say a 10K race, and you just booked it, and that was, say, 6 weeks away, would you start training straight away, or would you train every other day, or how would you play that one out?
Very individual, like I say, it depends on the individual there. The first thing I'd say is it depends on where you currently are. So if you've never done a run before, then you're going to have to build up a little bit more gradually. But it doesn't mean you can't run because you've entered the race and you want to progress towards run walk in that race or running that race completely. So I think you at some point in your week you're going to get out and do a walk or a walk run. There's some great apps out there like Catch the 5K, which can help guide people. We coach people who start from absolutely nothing and build themselves up. And some people like to be part of communities like the RunThrough Run Club, which people of all abilities go there, and there's different sessions for them to get into. What I think is important for anybody of any standard is a gradual build up towards the race, that you're aiming to peak towards that race, so that you want your best performance to come on the day of that race. So if it's somebody who's aiming to complete the race, they want to gradually build that training up so that they are in a good place to complete the race on that day. Whereas if you're looking to run a fast time, you want to be tapered down, you want to be a little bit fresher. The first thing I'd actually do before I go out and do any run is get a suitable pair of trainers, which is something people sometimes don't consider. They go, I've had these trainers 6 years, I'll get out on the road. go and get yourself a good pair of trainers before you start that training build-up.
A good example of that, my mum, she was wearing a pair of like normal pumps and she's running an hour a day in these pumps. And I'm just like, how do you not notice that, Matt?
She looked good though.
Yeah,
she looked
fine.
great.
Yeah.
She looked great. That's the main thing.
When you say gradual, does that mean if you are used to running, say, 10 to 15 miles a week, does gradual mean you build that up, say, 5 miles per week up to a certain point? Or is it gradual as in every day you run a little bit further than the last?
I think, one of the traps people fall into is, and I hear this rule a lot that's branded around online, which is like the 10% rule, build up 10% more than you were the week before. I think the first thing we have to accept as coaches and runners is that progression is not linear. It doesn't just keep going up. Because if you just keep adding 10%, and you're eventually going to run out of time and certainly time to do your training, and you're going to bulk that mileage up really quickly. For me, it's looking at, say, if you've never ran before in your life and you're just starting out, then maybe one run and one walk is a good place to start in the first couple of weeks. And don't be afraid to keep that, what we call like consolidate that over a couple of weeks. Don't be afraid to repeat that same process over 2-3 weeks. A lot of people always want to do something different and they want to see progression all the time. They want to get faster or they want to go longer every single week. But sometimes repetitiveness and getting the basics right first actually leads to that success. And we talk a lot about it, you and I, about creating consistency and consistently good habits. So actually, rather than looking at it, I did one run this week, so I'm going to do 2 next week. Actually, if you did 1 this week, that was 1 more than you did the previous week. And if you do 1 more the following week, so if you do 1 and 1, that's 2 more than you were doing before. So actually, that's still progression. Yeah. So I think it's really important not to just keep pushing yourself every week to think I need to do more. Sometimes be happy with consistency, because that's what's going to get results if you can stay injury free and keep consistent.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like you notice when people build things up over a period of time, like it's the best way to stay injury free as well. And then that's something we need to come on to as well. So what is the best way to, I know it's a massively broad question, but what is the best way to stay injury free? I'm just going to pop over there just to look at the camera.
Yeah, no problem. So Matt's just going to double check that my hair's all right. His is always on point. Injuries, I think, you've got to accept that as runners, we are going to get injured at some point. That will happen. I have to accept that as a coach. Sometimes you feel a lot of responsibility when an athlete picks up an injury and you get a little bit worried about that, but it's part and parcel of people's running journey. I think there was a study done recently that showed 3 out of 4 runners report some form of time off in a calendar year. That's 75% of runners have some time off due to a niggle or an injury in a calendar year. So it is going to happen. So what we have to do there is we've got to look at, what's the best way to reduce the chances of that happening? Now, for me, a lot of it comes down to load management. And when I say load management, it is that gradual progression and not doing things too much. So people who, for me, tend to get injured by doing either things too fast or doing too much. Okay. So point number 1 would be manage that training load. But then there's other things that you can do around your training as well, which could help. Some strength and conditioning, like a basic level of strength and conditioning, will help to strengthen muscle tissues and certainly around the joints that could prevent you getting injured. I'm not saying it will prevent you getting injured, but it could help. Stretching and mobility could help. Research says that stretch and mobility maybe isn't linked highly to performance anymore, but actually if you've got stiffness around certain, particularly the major joints, then that could lead to a running injury. So there's certain things that you could be doing. There's certain cross-training you could be doing to bulk your volume up, but to offload from the running, swimming, that sort of thing. So there's lots of injury risk management, what we like to call injury risk management tools that you can add into your program, including stretching, mobility, foam rolling, all the massage tools out there that you can think of. But the most important thing for me comes down to lifestyle. So work on your lifestyle. Sleep is really important. It's the best form of recovery. And rest and recovery is crucial. And they cost nothing. So actually, before you go out spending hundreds of pounds on massage tools and all that type of stuff, get the basics right first. Lifestyle, nutrition, sleep. Do those. They're the cheapest things you can do and the best things you can do. I know from personal experience, I've gotten a bit of an addictive state, and I was doing stretching every day I think I've done it every day for almost 3 years now. But I use the app FIIT, the FIIT app, and I follow that just a same flow on there, like a yoga flow every single day. And I find that's a really easy tool for me because I don't have to think, I can just follow the program on the screen. Is there any other ways you think you could recommend people using strength training or guidance and where to look? Yeah, like things like the FIIT app are really good because they give you that guidance, and I think that's sometimes what people are looking for. They're looking for guidance from the right people. So we use a training app called Final Surge, and the athletes we work with, they benefit from that because they see on their calendar every single day what they need to do. And the feedback from them is that they'd be lost without it because we're providing them with structure, we're providing them accountability, and ultimately guidance from experts who haven't just been there and done it running wise, they've also worked with hundreds and thousands of runners who are like them. And I think that's the most important thing to get across. Just because I'm an elite athlete, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to help you as a runner. What's going to ensure that I can help you as a runner is an experience that I've got with working with similar runners like yourself, runners of all abilities. And you've got to go and find that sort of information out there. And there's apps like the FIIT app. There's some really good stuff on YouTube as well, like Yoga with Adrian. A lot of people use that, really good. I certainly use that. Social media is good, but you do have to be careful as to what's good out there, what's not so good. We've been working with you at RunThrough now for the last year, and we're starting to share a lot more content on there because we think it's really important to get the right information out there to people. And I think now, particularly when you see what's going on Twitter with a lot of false accounts being set up and things like that, there's becoming more of a kind of a safeguarding thing around it as well to make sure that actually it is the right stuff and people are following it safely. So I think there's a little bit of responsibility from us as well to make sure we are putting the right stuff out there for people to access.
Definitely, yeah. So we had a few questions. We put this out on Instagram story at the end of last week and asked a few guys for questions. So I've got a few here, Lewis, just to go through if that's all right.
Yeah.
So one of them is, so what is a taper?
Great question, yeah. People associate a taper with a marathon because it's a buzzword around the marathon. It's usually the last sort of 2 to 3 weeks where ultimately what people do is they ease down into the marathon so that they are fresh, ready to race on the day. So all the training they've done, they absorb that training, they get the training adaptations from that, and then they're nice rested, nice and recovered going into the marathon, so they're nice and fresh, ready to perform their best on the day. But when I speak to a lot of people, including we've done run-through Q&As before, I've asked people the question, do you taper for 5Ks? Do you taper for 10Ks? Do you taper for half marathons? And the general answer back, majority of the time, is no, I don't. But as elite athletes, as we know, as you know, as well as myself, any big race we were targeting, we would taper into.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what you're doing there is just ensuring that you're fresh, ready to perform at your best on that day. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to accumulate fatigue going into the race that you feel flat on the day. Yeah. The taper is definitely individual. People respond well to different taper strategies. I wouldn't say there's one taper fits all. But what I would say is the majority of people don't taper enough into 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathon. But then on the flip side, what we tend to find with runners who we work with is they actually taper too much into the marathon because they find out about it and then they think, oh, I need to be really well rested, and they almost take the foot off the gas a little bit too much. So it's a really fine balance, and it's a mind game as well.
Well, you often see like a lot of our run-through runners come every single week. Our season pass holders do that every single week. So they're training maybe even for a marathon in April, but they'll race every single weekend. But when you say race, we were talking about this before, weren't we? We were saying like you can race every weekend and it still be part of your training. So a half marathon race might actually be just a long run for you to meet up with friends and family and just have a day out. Essentially, I've been at Alton Towers today and a few of you guys might have seen me there just cheering on people. And sometimes those kind of events are just literally a day out with friends and family. It doesn't have to be about running the fastest time possible. Like, do you find that from a coaching perspective, it is a solid way of looking at things?
Yeah, so the elite athletes I work with in Loughborough race the last 2 weekends, and you don't always want to be racing every weekend. But what I say racing every weekend is, by all means, you could go to a race every weekend. You don't want to be racing hard every single weekend is what I'm trying to get across.
Do you mean hard, like is it like a heart rate thing, or is it like a talk test thing that you talk about sometimes?
Yeah, so
what is hard compared to?
I would say hard for me is just max effort. So where you're like 9, 10 out of 10, struggling to breathe, at the end you're on your hands and knees, you've really worked hard. Yeah, if you're doing that every single week and you're asking your body to then recover off the back of that and you're trying to train in between, that's really demanding, not just physically but also mentally. So what we've done with the guys the last couple of weeks is they train through those races. So as you mentioned, the races were part of the training plan. So I planned it in so they were using races as training. And it's a really good way to get that little bit more out of yourself to hopefully bring you on from the races. But there's also examples where, I've just, my phone's been going nuts over the last few weeks because the London Marathon got announced and then people look at races and then they say, right, there's this race on this day. And I'll say to them, okay, yeah, we can do that, but you're going to have to be disciplined with that because we don't want you to run too hard 3 weeks out from the marathon. So it's a 20 miler, for example. So why not go there and do it as a steady run, do it controlled. And then there's a flip side, like I've got parents who go to parkrun with their kids on a Saturday, and I want them to do that because I think that's important. Or we've got people who want to go to run a run through 5K or 10K with friends and family. So if they've got a 10K run on the Saturday, then I say, well, why not go to a community race, be surrounded by positive, like-minded people, and just easy run it. And then that comes down to the individual having the discipline of saying, well, I am going to run with a friend. My best advice with that would be buddy up. Yeah. Buddy up with someone who you know will take it easier and you'll run it together. But so many of us spend our time training on our own. We had the benefit, and we were quite fortunate, I think, where we came to a university where we spent a lot of time in a group, but not many people do have that kind of privilege anymore. They do a lot of training on their own. I think races provide a great opportunity to go to a community like RunThrough, get to know people, and just enjoy your weekend, because it gives you something to look forward to as well. And I think you should keep them in there, definitely.
Just as a build-on point from that question there, what's the difference between an elite athlete and their preparation for a race, and they take it to a normal runner? And I'd say I'm a normal runner now, and probably you are as well these days, maybe. But
I am, yeah.
yeah. So an elite athlete like Kipchoge or someone fantastic like that, preparing for a marathon race or even preparing for a 5K race, what's the difference?
So I'll use Kipchoge as the example because I think he is a really good example, and a lot of people are in awe of Kipchoge, and rightly so. He is arguably the greatest ever distance runner, particularly at the marathon. But how many times have we seen him race this year? I can count it on one hand how many times I've actually seen him race. Now, if you compare that to the majority of the runners out there, whether they are elite, whether they're club runners, whether they're running their first ever race, they'll probably race 15, 20 times. But he is very disciplined. He's like, no, this is where I'm going to perform well. I'm maybe going to have a half in the build to marathon, and that's it. And the rest of the time, I'm training, and my training is purposeful towards those big aims. So
is it partly because that's he only runs when he gets paid as well? So do you think that's an element?
A little bit, yeah. And again, that I guess that falls into he's doing it as a career.
Yeah.
So he wants to keep himself injury free. Sometimes if you race too much, if you're racing too much on the hard scale, I think the biggest thing for the elites, I guess, is it's really hard for them to turn up to a race and run easy because the spotlight's on them. Yeah. So it's a profession, it's a job. So if they enter a race, they'll also usually get an appearance fee. So imagine, as a RunThrough organiser, you pull in Eliud Kipchoge and you say, right, we're going to pay him this amount to be here, and he comes up and he has a jog round, you're not going to be very happy. Yeah. That's an expectation.
That's kind of my point, because you do see these elite athletes running a few times a year, and people sometimes look at that and think, well, that's what everyone has to do because that's the way the elites do it. But the difference is that they have to run the best because they might be collecting points for some sort of IWF score system so they can get in different competitions. So there's a different mindset for that sort of stuff. And
100%.
In the olden days, you always used to hear about the old school athletes like Ron Hill and race every weekend. And you just do everything.
Well, if you look on the track, your Laura Muellers and you people like the runners like that, they race every week on the circuit in the summer on the track, and the intensities. The biggest difference with someone like a Kipchoge is racing the marathon, so they don't race as much. But certainly 5K, 10K runners. Eilish McColgan, a great example from the summer. She just was relentlessly racing and getting some really good performances. But I think, the biggest difference for me between the kind of the top elite and people who are doing this because it's a hobby and it's fun and they want to be out there is exactly that. You want to be out there with people, socialising. There's no socialising involved when you're an elite athlete, apart from maybe a little bit after the race. They are there. They mean business. And and you're right, it's their job. It's absolutely their job. So yeah, that's the biggest difference for me.
So I've got a bit of a different question now. What kind of kit do you wear? I know you just mentioned to them you wore a pair of RunThrough socks and you find them quite useful, but do you wear the same kit in training as you do in a race day, or is there kind of a differential? And if you do wear the same kit, how do you get away with not actually wearing the kit down to be able to wear an old pair of shoes or an old pair of socks on race day?
I am definitely not a kit snob. I don't buy a lot of kits. I make my kit last. The thing I do buy a lot of is trainers, because I think they're essential. I think if you wear them down too much, if you go over 500 miles these days in a pair of trainers, you're going to feel it in them. So I think trainers are essential. Don't skimp on them. Find a good, comfortable pair, and that is apparently the research points towards that. Comfort is one of the biggest factors now to help prevent injuries and for you to feel good in a pair of trainers. One thing I would say for people is don't be afraid to vary your trainers as well. So one thing we do, we have like multiple pairs of trainers. We'll have like a trainer that we'll run a lot of mileage in, but then we'll have a different trainer that we run our faster repetitions in. Because they're designed for that reason. So don't be afraid to do that, and don't be afraid to buy like a different racing shoe. But what I would say is then do a bit of training in that trainer to get used to it. Same as I said to you today, the RunThrough socks. I love the RunThrough socks, but I'm not just saying it because he's here. I got massive blisters at Manchester Marathon. I wore a pair of Nikes. And I came in the office and Lucy said to me, "You should have worn a pair of RunThrough socks." And I kind of laughed tongue in cheek. And then I did wear a pair of RunThrough socks afterwards, and I was like, "Oh my God, they're amazing." But now I stick to what works. So once I find something as well, I stick to what works. And I think you should trial them, because this is just something personal to me, but I get a lot of chafage, like at the top of my legs for some reason. I don't know why, it's just from the shorts. And like certain shorts are worse than others, and I don't find out until I train in them. Yeah. So you might find things out about kit, and what you don't want to do is find that out in a race. Yeah. Because there's nothing worse, is there? That's the worst time for it to happen. Like I wear lycra shorts because of the same exact reason. And yeah.
Like there's loads of things you can do for like your clothing, just to kind of. But with shoes, and I know I hear this a lot, people wear the carbons, the fast shoes, and they wear them during training sessions as well. Is it best to wear them every single session that you're running hard in, or can you run a hard session and not wear a pair of carbons? I know like the difference in time when you're running them compared to not running them is sometimes huge. So
it's a massive debate at the minute, because you've got on one side of the coin, you've got people saying they save your legs because they've got like this cushioning in. But on the other side of the coin, you've got people saying they haven't got the stability of other shoes. So there's a lot of people overloading things in them and overtraining in them. I think again, it's very individual. My personal preference with them is use them sparingly in training and use them for races, but also condition yourself in training to use them. So don't just take them out of the box and race in them. The jury's out on carbon in terms of what's the best shoe now. Everyone's caught up. So again, it's individual. I think the elites benefit a little bit more from them, because they, just from the way they run, their running technique, their running form. And I think there's now a temptation for people to put them on a lot more than they should do. Like we see it in the office, people have them on the next percent to go out for an easy run. Yeah. They weren't designed for that. They're designed to run fast, and they're designed to run fast in a very straight line. So unless you're running fast in them, you probably shouldn't have them on. And then I'd be really careful. The other thing I just wanted to say about kit, particularly now it's got dark, is one of my biggest bugbears, particularly with the group I coach here in Loughborough, is they come dressed in the evening in dark clothes. Like, it sounds so basic, but buy reflective and buy light clothing. Like, it's so important. For me, like, safety should always come first, always. And like, if you're going into the winter and you're starting running, or you've just started running, you cannot beat like a reflective jacket or just like a headlamp or a head torch. Your safety is paramount. So, have a look out there. There's some really good kit. Your one that sold out that year was incredible. It went like hotcakes. Oh yeah, I couldn't get all of them.
It was in the Guardian. It got featured in the Guardian newspaper, and it just sold out within like days. So we've got loads more this year as well. But we'll prepare this time.
So was it like a flash jacket, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a gilet, and there's a longer one as well. Yeah. They are useful.
Yeah.
So just obviously we've got a short on time, so I want to just kind of go into the last couple of questions. And so tips for runners building into a race day. So like maybe a few tips you can think off the top of your head that would be useful, and it could be in terms of eating, it could be in terms of what to bring or prepare for that race day, or it could be stuff to prepare for to use after the race itself.
I'm going to give you my top tip, my top coaching secret. It's one we use with our athletes. We call it the 4 Ps. It's preparation, planning, practice, and pacing. Before any race, you should apply all these principles. Preparation comes in terms of things like you said, nutrition. Have you got your food in? Have you bought it? So many people forget they've used all their gels, for example, when they're training for marathon in training, and then they've got none left. Are they in date? Like, if you're travelling abroad, have you packed something as simple as like a porridge pot in case you don't like the breakfast at the hotel? You know, things like that. Have you thought about where you might eat? London Marathon, the restaurants book out so far in advance. It's so hard to get in anywhere. So preparation is key. Like then that falls into planning ahead. If you've got a run-through race booked, it's a major race, or if you've got a major marathon, have you booked your hotel? Have you looked at transport? Take all those stresses away from you on race week. Have it all in the calendar, all booked in. So planning, preparation. Also planning the training in. What's it going to look like? So have you got that planned in? Have you got it mapped out? And then practicing what we spoke about. Have you practiced your gel strategy? Have you practiced your breakfast? Like getting up and having the same breakfast that you might have on race day. And then practice it in racing. Go and do a time trial. You know, if you're aiming for a 5K or a 10K, have a breakfast, go to, you know, a run through Battersea or something like that. Practice it. Does it work? Trial it and keep trying it. You can train that type of thing. And then for me, the biggest thing is pacing. Get your pacing right. And again, you can practice your pacing in training. You can practice it in races. Don't be afraid to go and do that in a race situation. But get that pacing nailed down, because the majority of people go out too hard. There was a scary statistic from New York Marathon this year which showed because of the heat in New York, they compared this year's times to last year's times, and the drop-off rate was massive because of the heat and humidity. But ultimately, it was just because of pacing. People underestimated it, and then it led to things like cramp and stuff like that. So, yeah, preparation, planning, practice, and pacing before your race day.
Solid that. Very useful. Okay, so the final question is, so like we talk about coaches, you're a coach yourself. Why is a coach or a training group useful to people?
I think I'm going to start with a training group. I think in-person training groups have that community spirit. You know, I jogged over towards Park Run on Saturday, and I looked and I see it at run-through events, you know, we go to Press World, and I see hundreds of people walking towards the start line. It just makes me smile. I just think it's amazing, that community. You know, it's brilliant. People coming together when they'd usually be indoors, they're outdoors, fresh air, and a training group offers that. You know, it also gives you that level of accountability. If people have been at work all day, it's sometimes harder to get out the door when you're on your own. And if you're going to meet people in a group, it's a lot easier. We have online training groups now, and we've started to set that up a little bit more, where we're having like online run clubs, online challenges, where people feel part of a community online. Not everyone can go and meet up with people, but we still want them to feel part of a like-minded community where people share the same goals, have the same interests, they're aiming towards something that's very similar. And that's hard to find. Like, it's really hard to find, and it means you've got something in common. Everyone's on the same page, and everyone's like interested in what you're doing, and it just makes you feel good. And there's that support around it, and you've got positive people, not just the coaches, the athletes to bounce off, and that's really, really powerful. And then from a coaching perspective, for me, the biggest thing from coaching, and I'll use the buzzwords that we always get from the athletes who we work with, they always say that, you know, it provides them with structure, and they know what to do because they're getting that structure from an expert. They don't have to think. It takes the pressure off them. They come home and they know exactly what to do. It's on a plan. It's written out for them. They have accountability. Now, I believe the accountability stops with the athlete, but I totally get what they mean. You know, they know that someone's checking in. I can see whether they ran. It's linked to our apps. I can see if they've done their training. So they know if they don't do it, they're getting a red dot next to their name. And I'm going to ask the question, why is the training not done?
How does that work? So someone goes for a run and it goes on their Garmin or their smartwatch. goes to Strava, and then how do you see that? How do you monitor that?
So what they do is when they sign up for our coaching, no matter what plan it is, they come on, they link their watch with the app that we use. So as long as they use Strava, Garmin, or something that tracks their running, what it does is it pulls the data from there, like it does with Strava, automatically through to the app. So as soon as they record something, it comes through to the app. So if they're not recording it, we can see that it's not being completed. If it fails to record, they can input it manually and update us.
So your coaches then go into this app and then comment on these training runs just to see if they're doing the right thing, not going too hard.
Absolutely, yeah. And we can see all the statistics, we can see heart rate if they use it, we can see the pace, we can see the distance, we can see the map. We're not stalking them, I promise. But also, even it's good even from a safety perspective. Like, we know we track our athletes sometimes, they put live trackers on, that sort of thing. And we give feedback on the sessions. I'm a big fan of asking them first, how did that feel? Stats can look amazing, but actually I want to know how they felt. They can rate it, they can score out of 10, they can put on there all their details. So it's just a really good way to go back and forth. And ultimately, I think the biggest thing for me about coaching, particularly online, because I was worried about it when I set it up because I wasn't going to see people in person. But so many people use these exact words too, as they say it's more than a training plan and we become more than coaches. And I do feel like we have that relationship with the people we work with in a sense of they're not just an athlete to us. We are there for them, we care for them, we do mindset sessions, we do Q&As. We work holistically with the athletes who we work with because we want them not just to be better runners, we want them to work on themselves as well. And that's a really important part of it for me because we find that generally happy runners are good runners. So we've got to work on both of those aspects and that's what we try to do.
Perfect. Well, obviously, thanks to Lewis today for giving up his time. Lewis from New Levels Coaching. And Lewis, to find out about your group training, how do people find out about that and what's involved?
Yeah, they can go onto our website. We're actually running a promotion this week for our new challenge that we're running. We're doing a 5K challenge, 10K challenge, half marathon challenge. We're looking for small groups of people. We will only take 20 people onto the challenge, each individual challenge. We want them to target a race, as you were saying, and we're going to provide a training plan for a group of people. So they'll be part of a like-minded community of people, all aiming towards a common goal, which is a race distance. And they can sign up. That starts on December the 1st. We're going to do a marathon one on January. I hate January the 1st, but it is going to be January 1st.
New year, new me.
New year, new me, but only because it falls in line with the major marathons. And we do one-to-one coaching. So that's our group coaching challenges. We've run them in the past. Last year we did 2 Strong to Run challenges, so we're going back to a couple of challenges now. And we've got one-to-one coaching as well, where we work with people all year of all abilities. And you can find out more, just go onto our website, newlevelscoaching.co.uk. All the details are on there. And likewise, if you ever want to get in touch, just drop us a message on social media. Either myself or one of the team at New Levels Coaching will answer your questions. And we will never leave a question unasked. So if you pop a question on there, we'll always get back to you.
Perfect. So thank you, Lewis. And to the Run Through runners, we look forward to seeing you next weekend, Hampton Court Palace 10K, Draycote Water. We've got the London half end of the month as well at Olympic Park. We've also got lots of Santa runs. I think it's the UK's largest Santa run series. So we've got races every single weekend, all in the lead up to Christmas. So we're dead excited about that. And thank you again, Lewis. And I'm going to go turn the camera off really awkwardly while it goes silent.
Well, that's it. Bye to everyone.
Nice one, guys.
Yeah, if you are having a race at the weekend, enjoy it and make the most of it. Run well, run hard, but run with a smile on your face, particularly if you've got a Santa suit on. Do they get a Santa suit?
Santa hat.
A Santa hat.